Did you know that Britain once had a plan to build a Jewish state in its Guyanese colony? Called the Jewish Colonisation Scheme, Britain proposed plans for Jewish settlement in British Guiana in 1939 so that Jewish people could avoid Nazi persecution in Europe. The question of Jewish immigration and refuge had always been there. That began in the wake of the Balfour Declaration, but became more persistent in the 1930s due to the rise of Nazism. In this video, I will talk about why Guyana was chosen out of all other possibilities, the outline of the scheme, the reaction to the scheme, and why the scheme was eventually dropped. In July 1938, the Evian Conference was held where 32 countries participated in response to the Jewish refugee crisis. The conference was an initiative by Franklin D. Roosevelt, even though the USA was reluctant to accept Jewish refugees themselves as the country limited immigration. By 1938, around 150,000 German Jews, or 1 in 4, fled the country. However, when Germany annexed Austria in March 1938, an additional 185,000 Jews were brought under Nazi rule. So on July 6, 1938, 32 delegates met in Evian, France. For some reason, Roosevelt chose not to send a high-ranking official to the conference and instead chose Myron C. Taylor, a businessman and close friend of Roosevelt, to represent the United States in the conference. The conference lasted for 9 days, and whilst delegates offered sympathies for the refugees, all countries, including the USA or Britain, which planned to heavily restrict Jewish people from entering Palestine, made excuses for not allowing more refugees, apart from the Dominican Republic. Irrelevant to this video, the Dominican Republic, which was under the notorious dictatorship of Rafael Trujillo, actually accepted an amount of Jewish refugees in order to whiten the Dominican population. He would also be the catalyst to the anti-Haitian sentiment in the country. Back to the video. Although the conference was a failure, the Intercontinental Committee on Refugees was formed on July 14, 1938 in the conference to continue to work on the refugee problem. When the German government heard about the conference, they thought it was quote-unquote astounding that foreign countries that criticized Germany for their treatment of Jews but did not want to accept Jews themselves in their countries when the opportunity offered. In November 1938, a massive attack on Jewish people and property occurred. This event is called Kristallnacht, meaning Night of the Broken Glass. Even though the news was widely reported in the USA, most Americans remained reluctant to accept Jewish refugees. A bill was proposed, the Warner-Rogers Bill, an effort to admit 20,000 Jewish refugee children. However, it was not supported by the Senate. The pogroms in November 1938 prompted an urgent response to the ongoing Jewish refugee issue, since European powers had refused to confront the crisis. At the time, Britain's White Paper of 1939 under the Neville Chamberlain government, which was a policy statement in response to the Arab revolts in Palestine, called for the Palestinian state within 10 years, with provisions of a majority Arab population, limited Jewish immigration by 75,000 over 5 years, and restricted land purchases by Jews. This paper was the official policy of mandatory Palestine until the end of the mandate in 1948, following the foundation of so-called Israel. As a result, Britain finally proposed their Guyanese colony for resettlement. There were other colonial outposts that were considered for options too, but it was settled for British Guiana. This was the 4th time that a colonisation scheme, which was actually referring to mass immigration, was facilitated in the colony. The first was the Indian Colonisation Scheme. The second was the Colonisation Scheme of 1928, not targeted at any specific immigration group. And then the third was the Assyrian Colonisation Scheme to help Assyrians who fled Iraq, but was a failure due to financial constraints. There was one more colonisation scheme after the one I'm going to talk about, post-World War II, as it talked about the resettling of post-war Europeans, but that was also a failure. In February 1939, an international investigating committee of the Intercontinental Commission on Refugees arrived in British Guiana to explore the proposed area. The land that was considered was a 42,000 square miles area in the forest and swamp region. Neither the coastal region, which comprises 4% of Guyana but holds 90% of the Guyanese population, nor the open region next to it were considered in the proposal. 4 years earlier, a study found that a plan to resettle 20,000 Assyrians suffering persecution in Iraq in the same region was deemed unsuitable. Despite this, the committee proposed a 2-year period in which 3,000 to 5,000 young people with professional training would be sent there to test out the practicality of large-scale development and investment. Prime Minister Neville Chamberlain announced that the Jewish settlement in British Guiana would bring the establishment of a new community which would enjoy a large measure of autonomy and representation in the government. The Jewish Colonisation Scheme was described as a new Balfour Declaration, which was the declaration where politician Arthur Balfour pledged for a Jewish homeland in Palestine in 1917. The only Jewish organisation that was involved in this scheme was the American Jewish Joint Distribution Committee, which helps Jewish refugees' efforts. The response to this proposal was mixed. In a letter to the Times, A.J. Schwelm, a colonization expert, said that European settlement was impracticable and doomed to failure. Rabbi Hillel Silber, an American and Zionist leader, was also critical of the scheme. Meanwhile, the Guyana legislature and local authorities were against this scheme. The Refugee Committee found that allegedly the Guyanese people were receptive to the settlement of Europeans. However, the scheme did receive support from the Jewish Telegraphic Agency. They were hopeful and stated British Guiana could easily absorb and would welcome the settlement of 500,000 Jewish refugees, according to an article published in the local Daily Chronicle, co-authored by Theodore Orella, stock raiser, and Vincent Roth, former high-ranking civil servant. The Jewish Chronicle reported that Guyana would profit greatly if Jewish refugees were to apply their industriousness to the fertile Essequibo Valley. Dr. Joseph Rosen of the American Jewish Agricultural Association expressed optimism, saying all the territories across various parts of the world being considered as potential sanctuaries for victims of oppression in Europe, the British Guiana proposition appears to align closely with our criteria. However, the scheme was abandoned due to the eruption of World War II, which began on September 1st, 1939. Most Jewish people left Guyana in the 1960s following a series of race riots that occurred there. A prominent Jewish person in Guyana was Janet Jagan, the wife of Cheddi Jagan. Cheddi Jagan was the Prime Minister under British colonial rule and third president of an independent Guyana. You can watch my video of him that I made a year ago. It is currently the most viewed video on my channel. When Cheddi died in 1997, his wife became the successor. She died in 2009. Today, Guyana has a Jewish population of just 2, making it the least Jewish country of the Americas and one of the least in the world. We've reached the end of the video and I hope you learnt something new. All the sources will be listed in the description. Please make sure to like and subscribe for more videos like this.